Okay, so let me do. Nope. Hold on. See what's going on here. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is a lot of you have already seen parts of this, so just let me know if there is something new. Um, if you have any questions. So I'll skip over some slides that we have presented before or talked to them about very briefly, and I'll focus just on the new features that were introduced before. So we've talked about the AutoDB yesterday, so I'm not going to talk about it again. So Octo, what Octo is that it's basically it's actually a C layer on top of YataDB, which essentially runs SQL queries on top of data that's actually stored in YataDB. Our actual like runtime engine, where the actual queries are executed in M, but that's just an implementation detail. Uh, we we focus very hard on being SQL compliant and actually giving you the correct results, and we've put in a lot of effort to debugging various difficult SQL queries. Um, Octo is a YataDB application, and it's not a GTM application. So you cannot run this on GTM. You have to use YataDB. However, what you can do is that you could have a GTM instance that replicates to a YataDB instance, and that YataDB instance you could run Octo on top of it. And that's a lot of our customers have actually been doing that. So I guess if you at least were here for the previous slot previous presentation, you'll see that VistA just usually has lots of data, and people usually are trying to come up with different ways to get the data out of it. And FileMan's ways to get data out are, I have to say, kind of dated now, and nobody wants to go to the terminal and to try to set up a report. And today's technologies essentially kind of demand a standardized protocol where it's accessed by a GUI client that could shape the data in ways that you want and then present it to various stakeholders. So let me skip over this. You may have seen this before, and if you have any questions, I can ask about it. I can talk about it later. The main thing to know about Octo, this is our production configuration, and there's a lot of things going on here, but let's try to kind of simplify it. So what you're having over here, all of this is this is your production instance. It gets replicated down here to a replicated instance, and you run on that one. You run this program, and this produces a DDL which you load into Octo, and then from there you use a client to actually talk to the replicated global instance directly. And that's pretty much how it works. Now I'm going to show you a quick demo. So let's see. So this is you may have seen our officially supported client is still Squirrel. That hasn't changed, but I'll talk a little bit more about our efforts in that regard. So, oh, I don't know why it's not letting me pick anything on there. Did it break? Hold on, let me find that.
Did it freeze?
It looks like it froze. I'll just close it and open it again. Well, more than frozen. Well, have fun. Have fun. I don't know. You know how it is with any demo. It's always fun, like things stop working. So
Well,
need
I
to
wonder if
find
it's the
where it
same
is.
thing that was causing the problem with the PowerPoints. Maybe, I don't know.
There we go. It's gone now. And let me see if I can find it. Here we go. Now I don't see it. Where did it go? Oh, here it is. Okay. So, so let's connect over here. So hit connect. And as I mentioned before, its computer is a lot slower when I'm presenting, which is what other people have noticed. So here's a very simple VistA query. Select star from order status, and it would give you just the statuses from uh, from VistA. So in any case, we have a lot. I did not prepare for this presentation more complex VistA queries, but we have them running nightly in our Octo pipelines, and I actually have to thank. And he's not with CRH anymore, but Chris Combs helped me a lot in uh, giving me realistic VistA queries that we use to make sure that everything stays running. All right, let's see oops, I will show a demo that in a second. So let's go back here. So unlike YataDB, Octo doesn't have a specific. We do have specific version numbers, but mainly actually it's continuously released. So whenever you get on whatever is merged on master on GitLab is the latest version, and you could drop that version in at any time. And every version gets extensively tested as part of the merging in GitLab. All right, so this is what I wanted to focus on because I think we've had these presentations before. So, what were the biggest changes since last year? Well, I mentioned at the beginning of this talk that we spend a lot of time on making sure that Octo complies with the SQL standards. And this is actually turns out to be really difficult. And so we spend a lot of time uh, actually generating random queries and figuring out what breaks. And what we do is we mainly compare it against Postgres, and we figure out if something is different, and we figure out what the problem is, and we try to fix it. Sometimes, the Postgres behavior looks odd, and we would try to report to the Postgres people that they have a bug in their source code, but then they tell us, oh, no, 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 I know it's counterintuitive, and then they explain to us what happened. One one big change that we did over the last year is now we use something called AIM, which is an internal. It's basically a way to automatically say how your data should be cross-referenced. If you have M data, how you should use it should be cross-referenced, and you could use it for any application, not just Octo. But now Octo uses AIM for cross-references. Uh, this kind of is a breaking change so it's not, you actually have to follow a specific upgrade procedure to use that new version of Octo. And as far as I know, all of our production customers at this point have actually upgraded. Um, and this was a feature I kind of requested, and we've implemented. We wanted to figure out like what kind of data we have stored, and we have now \d and \d table name on the Octo command line. We have Rocto now has a flag to allow writing to tables, and that's gonna be, I think, that we're gonna talk about write functionality in the next slide. Sorry?
Can you tell us what SD means?
It's
You said you
it's
allow it,
taken
but it
from
doesn't. You didn't tell us what it was.
it's taken from Postgres because Postgres has that same syntax. \d is describe. That's what it stands for, and \d means dump all the list of the tables you have in the system, and \table name is dump the table definition that is in the system. So it is very nice to have. Some customers requested that we emulate MySQL date functionality. I have to say, by the way, I was just trying to get, that my MariaDB forked from MySQL because MySQL was bought by Sun and Oracle bought Sun, and people didn't like Oracle, and so they just forked MySQL into MariaDB, and Oracle, of course, did some licensing changes and whatnot. So in any case, there's such a thing as a MariaDB, which is essentially a fork of MySQL. And at this point, what happened is MariaDB decided that some of the date functionality in MySQL had bugs in it, and they needed to fix it. And guess what? Our emulation for MySQL is so good that we basically replicated all the date bugs in MySQL. That MariaDB doesn't work exactly the same. It uses the same function, but if you give it bad output, gives you different. If you give it bad input, gives you different bad output. So the next thing that happened was we have Octo standalone Docker image improvement. So we had an Octo standalone Docker image. It's not frequently used. We publish it for people to try things. It was not set up well, actually. I found a lot of problems with it. I finally fixed them all. So now it behaves exactly how you expect a Docker image to behave. Then we have speed enhancements, and these are actually pretty cool. We've actually, I think at this point, we've sped up Octo by 10 to 20% for initial cross-references, which is very good. What we do is we do parallel cross-referencing, and we added a compilation flag for YataDB called no line entry. So both of these they definitely improved the speed.
So Sam, I couldn't follow from the MySQL date function thing. Did people want to go back to the MySQL way, or did you change it to the MariaDB way?
No, we didn't. We're because essentially it's I'm talking about our emulation, and that there are bugs in MySQL that MariaDB fixed, but MySQL didn't fix, and so we we are compatible bug by bug with MySQL. Now but that's only for bad input. All the valid input works okay. So a bad input would be like you putting a negative year number. Is that you can't have a negative year number, but MariaDB and MySQL give you different answers for a negative year.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah, so for practical purposes, it doesn't really matter. Okay, I'm gonna keep that Power BI thing. Do I have another? I have to remember if I have other slides. What other slides I have? We've created, I'll skip our PI support and come back to that because that's one of the big items, and I'll talk about it some more. Uh, we've worked on a separate developer documentation. Now it's much clearer, I'm hoping. We spent actually a lot of time rewriting our developer documentation. So now if you actually want to try to develop Octo, we have much better documentation for what you need to get set up. And I've tried it like multiple times on Docker images. It was painful, but it's all done now. One of the big things now is that we actually really have read write in Octo. This was not really true last year. I mean, we had some writes, but we're getting much more that to be able to have write functionality. And one of the big things we've done is that we've completely implemented the check keyword. We implemented unique. We've implemented primary key. Now, check is actually really complex, so that's a big deal that we've got to implement it. And I'll get back to the Power BI, depending on how much time we have. VistA DDL generator. So this really applies to VistA people. So there are two suggestions from David Witten that got implemented. One is I finally implemented a way to display computed multiples. So they're essentially, thank you. I have an audience here who's actually clapping. Thank you, my local audience. The local audience will surprise you and tell you who he is very, very shortly. The computed multiples are essentially implemented as a single field. So there are size limits. So if it's more than 1 megabyte, it might not work. But I've not seen a single computed multiple in VistA that gives you more than 1 megabyte of data so far. So pointer fee. This is a change that was actually made by Christopher, and it turned out that Chris Combs never upgraded when he was trying our new version. He never upgraded his DDL thing, and then it was. It is completely true that pointer fields are in VistA are not necessarily integers. There are some decimal IENs, and you could have dates that are dynam, so that they're actually pointer values. Well, these two issues cause problems for these in pointers being non-integers cause problems for some ODBC clients. And the other thing we found out is, the SQLI package itself always considers pointers to be integers by default. And I kind of went around and around trying to fix this bug. And what I ended up doing is that I made sure that all pointers fields are now set back to integers. Next thing is that there was a map1 entry point. It turned out that needed a specific parameter that's not in the DMSQ package that comes from the VA. And I don't at this point I'm trying to avoid trying to maintain the DMSQ package. So I just I just changed this list now. Kind of works, and you just have to press enter manually. Um, this one is a big change because that has been requested many times. Variable pointers now get broken out into specific fields. That's so that's kind of the big variable pointer is the order file. The problem is we still do not index that specific field because it's kind of considered to be an extract field, and we don't index extract fields. Not for any good reason, to be honest, but that's how we implemented it. And we actually obviously have issues to work on that at some point. We another feature that was requested by a client is to actually export externally formatted dates, and I've implemented that as well. Let me ask people if you have any questions on this slide, because there was a lot here that. Oh, what's okay? The question is, what was the change to DMSQ that Christopher had? He's giving it away that he's here. The change is you. It's it doesn't the VA copy doesn't contain a parameter to say what the file number is. You actually have to. It actually interactively asks you what's your file number. So I don't know how you ever got it to work with the VA copy because it doesn't take a parameter. It knows that variable and asks you for it. So that's why it doesn't. I mean, you can just modify the code, delete the new, and delete the dir call, edit, or just do a small edit and make it work. But for for that reason, it's not commonly used anyway, so it was no big deal. So Christopher says he doesn't remember doing any of that. Now, the funny thing is that MSC FileMan does not package this at all. So you are getting the VA copy. So I don't know what copy you got that had that change in it. Okay. Any other questions? All right, let's move on. So, oops. Oh well. Okay, good. So I will go back to Power BI in a second. So our future, so let's talk about our future plans. At this point, we still do not have actual date time support. All of our support is kind of fake. We make it work, but we don't really have real date times in Octo. And so we're going to plan to work on that. The next thing we want to work on is one of our big, almost like constant requests from our clients is supporting more end clients that could talk to Octo. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about Power BI. We don't support the alter table statement, so all we do is support we just support create table. There are workarounds. You can drop table with the keep data keyword, and that will give you, and then you could recreate the table again. The last thing is we are working on implementing views, and I think Chris Combs told me that was one of his big pain points with using Octo is its lack of views. And let's see. Okay, let me go back to Power BI. So this gets back to the more client support. We have had multiple requests, I mean, many, for supporting various clients. And we emulate Postgres, but Postgres has like a 20 20-year development history at this point, maybe longer actually. There is so much that there's so much in Postgres and so much in the Postgres ecosystem. It's hard for us to actually implement everything. And so we've been listening to various people, talking to various people and asking them, what's a good client that we want to support as our next big client. And so that the two big ones that were actually requested was Jaspersoft and Power BI. And we found that Jaspersoft requires supports for schemas and namespaces. Mostly a big thing is really schemas. And at this point we are not we don't have schemas in Octo, and we're not ready to implement it yet. So uh, we tried working with Power BI, and results have been promising, but we've had a lot of things to work through. So I am pleased to report today that the Power BI is getting there. It's getting there. So I'm gonna go to Power BI now. So I'll go recent sources. So this is actually an Octo instance over ODBC, and you could see I can actually click and I could get the list of tables. And I can click on a table and it will show you what's there. So there you are. It's really cool. So I can go ahead and say I want to bring the orders table. I'm gonna bring customers and employees and categories and hit load. Maybe the color changes here. So I'm basically showing you it's actually kind of working. So this is pretty good. So Power BI actually gives you a lot of capabilities to create canned reports and have them used by your end users, and you're able to protect the Power BI reports using Windows security primitives. So if you want to tie to users in a specific domain or a domain group, you can protect that with those kind of things. So that makes Power BI, a good offering for our users who actually want more control over what to give end users. So I gave you the good news. Now I told you that this is almost working. I honestly still think we still have a few months of work on it because I tried it yesterday on VistA. It didn't work, but I just show you that we are getting to a point where we actually could support it. And getting Power BI to work, by the way, I anticipate that it will unlock a lot of the other Microsoft ecosystem stuff that will so it will be easier for us to use Excel. It will be easier to use, perhaps Access if you want to try using that to to connect to Octo. All right.
Sam, do you mind giving I assume BI stands for business intelligence. Can you give a pocket tour of why somebody would want to use Power BI?
Sure. Okay. Um, um, so here is I'll tell you the use case. Okay. Our Most of our users, what they want to do is nobody wants to write SQL statements by hand. What they want is a programmer or a data analyst to write the SQL statements, and the SQL statements would be, and then these SQL statements will kind of create a graph And then they want to package this graph as a web page that any user could visit at any point, and that whenever a user wants to actually and then you could give that web page to various people, and they would actually be able to connect and look at that data at any time. So that's kind of the idea, and that's what Power BI lets you do. It lets you package up like a report, like this report. I just created a simple report. Then you click publish here, and that kind of puts it somewhere in your Power BI. You could have it hosted on a local Power BI server or on something that's hosted by Microsoft, and it will just be available to users, and it will be protected by your Windows credentials. So you could access that report using your Windows credentials. Does that help answer the question?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good.
If somebody was going to run Octo, let's say Jordan was wanting to run Octo um, on a separate server running YadaDB with replication from GTM, um, would they have to have a server as big as the one that they currently use, since it wouldn't have as many people using it directly, interactively? Um, or
They
do you see?
that's I don't really know the answer to that question, and I suspect nobody at YataDB does. It might be hard to guess their usage needs. I think this is a question only they can answer, because I you know uh, it's it's always hard to know what happens in such a very big system, and I suspect they will probably need to spend a lot of time figuring out what the server size is.
Actually, can I just jump in for
Yeah,
just a moment on
yeah, go
that?
ahead, sure.
Which is, Dave, you're right that if you're running, let's say, 8,000 users on your production system, on your reporting system, maybe you're only running a much smaller number of users. I suspect on the reporting systems, it's not so much the CPU as the fact that the reporting system is going to need a lot more storage, right? Because you have all of your data from your production system, plus you have all of the cross references, and so the cross references then are going to be taking more storage. So I suspect that's where the replication system or the reporting system or the analytic system is going to need to be bigger than the production system.
Yeah, I expected that the hard disk would have to be, a significant multiple of the size of the original one. But I could imagine also that you replicated certain globals and didn't replicate other ones, um, so that the ones that you'd have to run the reports on you would be replicating, but you may not necessarily replicate everything in the database. Though, frankly, that would give you a good backup if you replicated everything.
Sure.
I was using Jordan primarily because it's one of the larger single systems that are out there. And I know that well, now that I think about it, I just realized that that would also be a way of doing an upgrade to YadaDB as well, is to run a
Yeah,
replication to a GTM system and then you could start from a GTM system to a YadaDB system, and then you wouldn't have the pain of trying to upgrade the GTM system.
well, firstly, there is no pain in upgrading a GTM system to YadaDB. The second thing is that one correction to what Sam said. The EHS Hakim system is running on YadaDB. It's not running on GTM. They switched some long time ago, a couple of years ago, I think. And so at this point, the the largest VistA system that I know of is actually running on YadaDB. And and again, the rolling upgrade capability is something that the code base has had for a very long time. So basically, doing a GTM to YotaDB upgrade is essentially a drop-in replacement. Doing an upgrade from one YotaDB release or one OS release like Red Hat 6 or 7 to, let's say, Red Hat 8 with a newer release of YotaDB, that again is a rolling upgrade. It's been the code base has been able to do that for 20 years or more, and it just kind of works. So there is no pain involved there.
I'm glad to hear it. I knew that at one point there was some trepidation about trying to do a huge conversion like that, but I'm glad that was successful.
But the trepidation is entirely in the in sort of the mind. The fact is that enough people have done it and it works. There was actually a large institution, a very large institution that did such a conversion, and they had me fly over all the way from Philadelphia, halfway around the world, and I spent an entire night in a data center, and it was one of the most boring nights I've spent because they were all talking in a language that I couldn't understand a word of, and they were doing the upgrade, and the biggest problems they had were actually network connectivity issues.
That's cool. I mean, we want YotaDB to take over the world so that VistA can take over the world. So
Yep.
Yep. YotaDB is the name. World domination is the game.
So
All
Sam,
righty.
okay, yeah, you're coming back. Yeah, there you go.
I'm back here. Anybody have any other questions? Okay,
yeah,
well,
the biggest ones would just be curiosity about some of the things, why having a field that had a number in it that was numeric confuses some of the SQL ODBC stuff, and if you could send it as a string instead, and if that alleviated their pain. I know number is not really a nice value, but I don't think pointers are the same thing as row IDs. So pointers to
yes, let me explain this specifically for you. So it's actually, it has to do with our implementation of the Postgres protocol specifically. I've not spent too much time on it, but I've been looking in the Postgres ODBC source code, and what happens is we do not specify in our version, for whatever reason, in our implementation of the protocol, we don't specify scale and precision. And what happens is that both of these get set to 5 by default. And so when you start doing inner joins, you're essentially doing an inner join between 1.00000 against, let's say, 1. And that confuses the system. And that's basically where the problem is, that some fields end up being interpreted as integers, and some fields don't get interpreted as something else, especially with joins. And so I stopped looking into it, and I chose the easiest solution, which is not going to break a lot of stuff, which is just switch them back to integers, especially since SQLi already asserts that all pointers are integers. And I thought, you know what, let's just stay with that. And it may break some minor stuff in VistA, but I have not. I mean, based on what I saw, there was nothing major that actually broke. So we're always doing an again, whenever you're doing an SQL queries into VistA, you have to make some assumptions, because it's not always a one-to-one translation.
I understand. I just I think that the visit file, the .01 field, is a date and time, and that means that it's a really common operation to point to the visit file. So
I looked into it. No, it's actually not. I looked into it. I thought so too. It's not. It was also it was an integer. It wasn't it wasn't really like, I was worried about that too, but that was that I could not, I actually looked through VistA and I could not find any date time pointers that actually had decimal points in them.
yeah, so what to reiterate what I hear you saying, there are pointers to date time, but there are very few, if none, pointers to date time where the dynum is a date time.
That's exactly right. Thank you very much. That's perfect. Yes, that's exactly
To
right.
my knowledge, the only dynum that is date time is probably the scheduling multiple inside of VistA, inside of the patient file. But that is not, that's a multiple, so there's no pointers to a multiple.
Yep. Thank you. And again, you know, I'm happy to revisit the issue, but it was I made the change just to make sure that the queries that Chris Coombs wrote continued to work properly. Now he worked around the issue, but anyways, I did fix it for him in the end. So